to just go ahead and get started because I value your time. Thank you for signing up. I'm Roseann Hanson, as I said. I am the Arts and Science Coordinator at the University of Arizona's Desert Laboratory on Tumamoc Hill. I'm also a naturalist and an author, most recently a book, Nature Journaling for a Wildlife. I think some of you have that book. I'm joined here by Ryan Petterson. Ryan is Director of Field Education at the School of Earth Energy and Environmental Sciences at Stanford University. Ryan teaches field classes and his background is in geology, which is going to be really great for today. And Ryan and I come at field sketching and nature journaling in very much the same way. Neither of us has formal art training. Both of us are fairly new to the sketching, drawing, watercolor. And so we are mostly focused, well, pretty much all focused on the natural history, on learning, and on using our field arts as tools to continue building our skills as naturalists. Also, I don't think Des made it on, so I want to just do a shout out. The website we're going to share today, the VR Glaciers website, Des McDougall with the University of Worcester in the UK put that together, and it's just phenomenal, and we want to give him a shout out. Thank you. Now, real quick, I'm going to do some like housekeeping stuff about Zoom, but while I do that, why don't you guys grab your field notebooks, some scrap paper, whatever. And while I'm talking about some housekeeping for Zoom, do some warm-up exercises. Run your pencil, make like 20 lines in a row, make some circles, make some squares, get your hand-eye coordination going, and that will help quite a bit as we jump in. So on Zoom, we're going to keep your mutes on. So please keep them on because that helps keep the noise down and keeps the speaker view. Note at the bottom of your screen, there should be, you'll see the chat symbol, chat. We're going to use chat for if you have questions and if we solicit during the Q&A period. Please keep that just for those questions, contacting us. If you see someone you know, please don't use the chat for chattering back and forth so that we keep it nice and clean so Ryan and I can see. Judy, I've got a message from Judy who says her video is not working. Try going down to the bottom on the left and looking at your video settings. I don't think anyone else is having video issues. We haven't gotten any messages on that. So sorry about that, Judy. All right, Ryan, did I forget anything else? We'll be giving some tips as we go.
No, that sounds good.
Okay, wonderful. So the purpose of today's workshop, as I said, is building your naturalist skill sets. We're all about becoming better naturalists through our field sketching, nature journaling. So today we'll walk you through a field experience. We're going to take you on a field trip and we'll introduce you to the location, and then Ryan and I are going to, Ryan's going to be the main guide with the VR Glaciers website, and then we'll choose a spot. We'll both sketch the same scene so you can see how our visions differ and techniques, and we're going to be like talking our brains out loud. So we'll show you why we're making the decisions and the marks that we're making. Then please sketch along, feel free. It's great, no pressure, should be a lot of fun. And you should come away with a better feeling for the thought and technique process for doing quick landscape captures. So we're going to focus on observing closely and intentionally and asking questions with our sketches and our field notebooks. And even though we called this a sketching workshop, we are not just learning to draw. We are drawing to learn. So keep that in mind. I've got a question.
I'm handling those in the chat. So you guys are talking.
Thanks.
Yep.
Well, right, I'm going to throw up the first poll because I want to find out what your levels are in terms of landscape sketching in your field notebooks and journals. So please fill out the poll. And now we're gonna go to Mosedale, Cumbria in the Lake District. So if you guys are ready, you've done your warm-up exercises, we are going to go. So I'm gonna give you a little bit of an overview and then hand off to Ryan. There we go, that's it. There we go. Okay, sorry about that bump. Now we are heading to Lake District National Park in the UK. You can see up there where Edinburgh is, Sheffield, just above the border between England, or just below the border between England and Scotland. And a little bit close up here, we're gonna zoom in a little bit. We are heading to Wasdale in the Southern Fells portion of the national park. And just above Wast Water, I think that's how you say it, which is the deepest lake in England, by the way. And now I think one thing I wanted to mention, so when we're getting ready for a field trip, I think Ryan and I approach this the same way. We do some research. If this is an area I haven't been to before, then I do some research. I make a species lists of birds, plants, other animals that I might encounter, things I want to look out for, and I go ahead and write that in my journal ahead of time. So I've got a bit of a head start. It helps me start understanding the landscape. I'll also do a little bit of research on the general ecology. Ryan will do geology because that's his big focus. So we've done that ahead of time. I've got some lists. I've looked up my metadata for the area, which I'll show you in a bit. And I think now I'm going to hand back to Ryan.
Great.
And he's going to take us to Cumbria.
Excellent.
Put on your wellies.
Hello, everyone. So, like Roseann said, my background is in geology, but I also want to make a little bit of a caveat here. I'm not a glaciologist, though, and I am not. My familiarity with this area has really just been studying in the last couple of days. If there are glaciologists that are in the meeting, I apologize ahead of time for getting things wrong. You're welcome to correct me if you see fit. Let's get us started with this. So this website here is, like she talked about, this is the VR Glaciers. This is a great resource, but it's also just fun if you want to, there's a lot of different places you can go. We are going to go to one in particular, which is here at Mosedale. And there are some other resources if you want to follow along, you can. I'm going to drop this into the chat window, assuming I can find the chat window. And you're welcome to follow along, but you don't need to. So if you are following along, what you should see is on the left is will be a series of 360 panoramas that we're going to use to sort of pick locations and see where we want to go. On the right is a satellite imagery or a map of the area with all the spots. So this is going to be basically this is going to be our little tour guide map here. And so we're going to play this as though this is a field trip that we're going on. We've done some background research, but we're walking into a new area and sort of thinking about how we would sort of tackle this space and go about doing this. And this is not going to be exactly what we would do in real life, but it's going to mimic a lot of the things that we actually do on field trips. And so one of those is just start by looking around, get a feel for where we are. Maybe zoom in and out of this map in case you want. You can see the larger, you can see we're all the way in there, and we're zooming down into the Lake District here. And I'll try and move a little slower because I'm not sure how much the video is lagging for people. So as we walk around, we're starting to think about the landscape and look at things, but really today what we want to do is show how doing field sketch drawings can help focus your attention at certain aspects of the landscape. So right now, as I'm looking around and sort of walking down this trail, I'm not looking for a perfect spot right now. I think this is one of the important things for me, and this will be true throughout this entire experience, is this is how we do it. You know, I'll talk about how I do it, Roseann will talk about how she does it, but this is not, there's no right way to do this. Don't feel like we're doing it a way that you don't do, that's totally fine. So how I would approach this is to not worry about getting a perfect view that I wanted to sketch. I'm just gonna get a view that works for me to start with, to just get myself warmed up, to start putting my eye into different aspects of what's going on. So as I'm doing this, I'm sort of walking around and looking for something that gathers my attention, has a little bit of three-dimensionality to it, has things that I feel comfortable being able to draw. And I'm not going to go too far down the path here, but I'm sort of narrowing in. I kind of like this wall. I actually really like this clump of trees, and I'm starting to like this view right in here. And I, start with why that is one, it has some foreground elements that I think would look good and would ground the whatever sketch I'm making. It's got some things in the middle ground, a nice little curve here of the creek that's sort of taking the eye out into the view. It has some trees for interest here. So I'm gonna sort of settle in on that. I'm looking around too to see if I want to do this as a horizontal landscape or a vertical landscape, because I think we tend to look at things and instantly go, oh, landscape, it's horizontal. Well, I think I'm actually liking a vertical landscape here. So now that I've narrowed in on this, I'm going to now change my video. So I'm also not wanting to take up my entire page here. I sort of feel like getting my sketching day on, so I don't want to take a huge amount of time for each sketch. So I'm going to decide I just want to do this sketch. I just want to do on this side of the paper. Makes it a little bit quicker and allows me to play with the rest of the space here. So what I'm starting with is, and in case people are interested, I'm using just a ballpoint pen, nothing special. Is to sort of block in some of the bigger features I can see, and I'm just doing some light lines right now. I apologize if you can't see these. If they're too light for you. But this is just to get some basic elements in first, and I'm looking at the horizon line is sort of an easy one to get in there. This creek is sort of an important feature, so I'm going to sketch that in a little bit. And I'm not treating it too preciously. This is a field sketch for sure. And this is something that we sometimes talk about, the difference between what's a sketch, what's a drawing, what's an illustration. And I don't have the right answer, but I do know how I tend to think about them for myself. And that's basically one of, it's not something that I have to get perfect. This isn't going in a field guide. It's not an illustration for a field guide. This is just mostly for me. And it's not necessarily about the aesthetics. It's about drawing my eye to different features. That said, I happen to like the aesthetics of sketches. So as I'm doing this, I'm looking at, first off, I'm already noticing there's some darker rocks up in this area here. And then I noticed that there's a change down to smoother slopes here. So that's already something that I've noticed just by doing this sketch. And I can see that, you know, on these slopes are little rocks. So there's something different about what's going on up here versus what's going on this slope. So that already is drawing my attention to things. I can also see that this slope coming in here, I'm not really sure what's causing that. This is a conversation we have in the field that I have with students a lot is everything has a reason. Nothing's completely by accident. And so anytime you see something and you are totally free and should wonder, I wonder why that's there. Because there's always a reason. Even down to, you know, looking at this slope. Well, why is this slope here? Why did this curve around there? Why are there trees right here? All of these things have some reason. They may not be profound, they may not be knowable, but they all have some sort of reason. So it's, to me, that's the great part about this is every line I put on my paper, I can have a question that goes along with it that says, I wonder why I put that line there. So as we come around here, I'm going to start putting in some foreground elements. So I see this bush in the front. I don't really know what that is, that grass, but it's definitely an interesting little clump. I'm putting in a little bit of shading and a little bit darker. And I'm putting in darker lines in here up front as we go back. As I sort of start to put in some details here, you'll see that I'm putting in bolder, thicker lines up front and lighter, thinner lines in the back. And that's sort of to add to this sense of depth. I'm also making sure that I'm looking for overlap in different things. You know, noticing that this bush overlaps a little bit of the slope, or another little bush or a rock back here maybe. And that's giving a little bit more sense of that three-dimensionality. Also, this slope overlaps these trees, and it's pretty clear that those trees are behind this slope. So those overlaps become pretty important. I'm going to start adding some more of these details here, and you see that I'm just doing these little lines that sort of suggest the slope of the ground surface. I'm also going to put I see some other clumps of grass. And this also helps a little bit of adding to the three-dimensionality of it is, you know, we see objects in the foreground and they're the same object that's moving back in the distance and we see it smaller. That helps give us more of a sense of that depth. I'm going to start darkening a lot of these lines now that I've got my general layout. I'm going to really bold in some of these lines. And you'll see I'm not being entirely particular about where, you know, what each of these marks look like, because it's the overall sense that I want, no individual line is all that important. In the distance, we can see a little bit of the far distant mountains. And these are a little bit bolder. And that's it for my first drawing. I might just, for the sake of it, throw in a bounding box on this. And this, again, I'm a fan of you know, putting foreground elements in front of the bounding box gives it even more of a sense. And that's just a really quick sketch. It doesn't have to be perfect, but already now I can go back and I can look at this and I can say, okay, well, there's something going on here that's different than what's going on here in the slope. Here we have sort of rocky outcrops. Here is smooth. Okay, that's something worth checking out. I have trees down here. I'm not sure why there's trees there. I think even down to just noticing that the slope of this hill, we tend to not even think about that, and slope is just slope, but slope could be, if I'm looking at a cross section, so if I cut a slice of the hillside, there are hills that look like this. There are hills that look like this. And there are cliffs. So each of these, if this is the hillside, if this is the mountain, there are different reasons why you would have a convex hill slope, a concave hill slope, a cliff. And all of those, I'm starting to ask those questions already about, well, I wonder why that slope is looking like that. And that's basically it. I think at some point I would, and we may do this later, is come back in and put some color in there. But there's
Ryan, we've got time if you want to do color now and also talk a little bit about the geology of the area. Give us an overview of what kind of valley this is and why we're on vrglaciers.com.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So as I'm putting in colors, and feel free to ask what colors I'm doing, but for the most part, I have a palette here. I'll show you my palette quickly. And I have a bunch of colors. You don't need all these colors, but I like playing around with them, so I have a lot. And I mostly just bounce between them. I know generally I know pretty specifically where they are, and I end up actually pulling paint mostly from my my mixing wells. I'm not too particular about getting things dirty. So I will be doing that on the side here.
Ryan, someone asked, made the observation about your pen. Can you tell everyone about your pen and why you choose that?
Yeah, so it's just a ballpoint pen. It's a Bic Cristal bold, but it's just a standard ballpoint pen. And the main reason I use just a ballpoint pen is, although I do have, and I have a fancy pants streak too, and I do play with, fancier fountain pens. But for the most part, when teaching, I use a ballpoint pen because most students that I'm teaching don't have fancy pens, and I don't want to make people feel like they have to have something fancy. Fancy things are fun, don't get me wrong, but a ballpoint pen is totally great. So that's the ballpoint pen. So yeah, sorry, let's go back, and this is at this point is also where I think starting to do the drawing, you don't really need to know entirely where you are. You can start thinking about it. You can start asking questions. You can start looking up information. So let's start talking about one of the reasons that one of the main reasons we chose VR Glaciers is because it's an excellent website, has great resources and great imagery. That said, it also is all of these examples of glaciated landscapes. And sorry, I may lose track of what I'm saying while I'm drawing, but this where we are here is a glaciated landscape, and we'll keep talking about that a little bit. And we're going to sort of look around for a lot of these subtle features that wouldn't necessarily be that if you were to do this hike, you may not even notice are there. But by sitting down and drawing, we will start to get a better sense of that. And so the things that we might be actually looking for is evidence of glaciations and what that might be. So let's back up a little bit about what glaciers are, just in case. So glaciers are basically big rivers of ice. It's not entirely accurate, but it'll do for now. And these come and go with climatic variations, and they leave pretty distinct records on the surface that we can go back and look at and tell something about when the glacier was there, what its extent was, what things were going on, what the general environment was while it was being glaciated. And so we're going to look at a bunch of different features that do that. Sorry, now turns out painting and talking about science is not as easy as it sounds. I'm doing a lot of distracting of myself. while I'm painting here, are there questions about so far from anyone?
So far, so good. No, this is going great. Your colors look great. Notice how he's just dabbing, not coloring solid. It's a great technique.
Using richer and richer colors as I come forward, a little bit more and more paint each time, to sort of bring the foreground out even more. So are people doodling along with us here, or are people just watching?
We've got a few people paint. Oh, yep, drawing along. We've got drawing along.
Awesome. Cool.
Question about the water brush. Yes, that is a water brush. That is a Pentel. And yes, there's water. It's plastic. There's water in the reservoir, and you just gently squeeze it to get more water onto the brush. And it's a great field tool. Ryan's a master at it. I'm really not very good at them. You'll see how I do mine.
Okay, so I am the mountains in the back here. I can see detail in these mountains, but this is a hard one to get used to. Is you don't necessarily want to put all the detail that your eye can see. If you were to put detail back here, it would bring this forward in a way that would make it look pretty weird. So being very sparing about detail as you move back in the drawing. I'm going to do one other thing, and I don't know, depending on how familiar people are with watercolor, this will either be obvious or really cool. Is one of the things we can do here with this, guys, I'm just going to brush in some paint here. I'm then going to wipe off my brush in on a paper towel, and then just sort of grade this down so that I create a graded, it's not a very clean graded wash, but a little bit of graded wash, so you can sort of match the gradation. And right away here, if you're paying attention, you will also notice in this photo, and this is true in real life, is the sky gets lighter blue towards the land surface. And that's mostly about dust in the atmosphere and scattering. And it's similar, though slightly different, to why these mountains back here end up looking a little bit purple because of scattering. So at this point, it still looks a little flat. I'm going to do one last thing here before I let go of this, which is to just start adding some shadows. And I'm just using shadow violet here. I could get fancier with the shadow coloring, but I don't really need to. A little bit of shadow in here. A little shadow right along with shoreline. Shadow in here. And then these guys get a little bit of shadow. And that sort of helps just pull the whole thing together. It's like, carpet. Pulls the whole ring together. And for now, I think I'm done in terms of a sketch. I'm going to put this a little bit in the center so you get a little better light. That's really all I need to do. Pretty quick, just a few minutes. And already I have a little bit better sense of the landscape. I have a better sense of, I've keyed my eye into sort of the different surfaces. And I've got some things that I may want to as we move around to other spots and want to start looking for. I'm curious about these rocks up here. They're just barely in my sketch, so I didn't focus on them. But I can see that they're outcropping, and maybe we'll get a better look at them later. As well as the surface that down here that's a little bit different and has the grass on it and has boulders sticking out. I think this is where I would say, well, let's look, see if we can differentiate this surface and why is this different than that surface. And maybe even go back into the trees here at some point and sort of think about why are there trees there and nowhere else. In this landscape, it very well could be a man-made reason, but in a more natural landscape, we might be looking for sort of natural phenomena that are making it happen there.
Hey, Ryan, we had a question. You pointed out the darker rocks as you go up the hill. Question was, do you know what type of rock walls those are?
I do actually, as it turns out. Let's. Do we have time to do another quick sketch?
You've got 5 minutes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to actually. This is a good transition here. I'm going to now move our view a little. Okay, so I'm going to get a slightly better view of up here. So I'm going to change my view, and hopefully not everybody sees this new view here. And here's how we might approach that situation is this is going to be even quicker sketch because I'm really just focusing in on those rocks, and I want to start thinking about what do I see. And for that, so I'll come up here, and basically we see a slope coming up here, and then a lip end coming off that way. So far, so good. We see edge of the rocks are doing something like this as they come off this way. From here down, this is kind of smooth with a little bit of rollingness to it. But these are all sort of, I can see some sort of squiggly layering in here and some cliffy stuff. Some other weird things going on this way, but there's a general layering to this. I'm gonna just give this a little bit darker. And so if I knew nothing about this area, I might already have a sense just by the way that that's out. My first guess would be it's something volcanic. Not knowing more than that, not being able to walk up next to it, I really couldn't tell much more than that. But having a computer and internet and knowing that Britain has the UK has some very good online digital maps. I did some homework, and these rocks are what's called andesites. So that is a name for a volcanic rock that is similar to like a basalt, but it's a slightly different composition but is erupted onto the surface and flows as layers. So that's what you're seeing in here is the layers of lava flows that have been sort of tilted and eroded. And those rocks are actually from a time period we call Ordovician. And so they're about 450 million years old. That's not something I would be able to tell strictly from looking at it right here. That's from pulling up other information elsewhere and connecting it with what I'm looking at here.
And you might have done that research ahead of time.
Yeah, I would have just like I did for this trip. I did that research ahead of time, pulled up some geologic maps. And if people are interested at the end, I can share those links because it's all publicly available. Nothing's, it's not necessarily easy to find or intelligible all the time, but it's available. And it's also available for the US as well. So I can share those things. I think it's pretty fun to pull up a geologic map before you go somewhere and take a look at what the rocks you're gonna see. So these are actually called for any geology nerds out there that I may just be talking to myself, and that's okay. These are actually called Berkerfell, andesites. And that's, geologists give names to packages of rocks that have a certain history and so that we can map them and talk about them and become friends with them, as it were.
That's awesome. I love that quick sketch.
Cool.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna.
There was a question. Yes, this is a virtual field trip. Neither Ryan nor I have been to the Lake District. So we are on a field trip together and explaining how we approach field trips and adding information to our journals, being observant. The questions are great because what kind of rock is that? Why are those trees there? Why is it green here and yellow here? Why is there a circle over here? These are all observations that are critical to nature journaling and sketching in your field notebook.
And I think one of the things that where this comes into sort of the sketching and the drawing part of it is, making sure to not, and this is something that I tend to stress pretty heavily when I'm teaching undergraduate students, is to not get intimidated by making a perfect picture. I think that gets in the way really easily when people are thinking of it as a work of art. And not only is it not as effective for what we want to do in terms of learning about the place and understanding what's going on, but honestly, I think it's not as fun if you get stressed about it. And so I really like doing quick drawings because they're fun. I don't have to get too worried about it. I can do a lot of them and not feel like any particular one is too precious. And it's pretty easy to do once you sort of get the hang of it. Have a sort of a repertoire of marks and general ways you might draw a hill slope or things like that. It becomes a lot easier to sort of record that information without having to fuss in a lot of detail.
Awesome. Well, those were awesome, Ryan. So the next step is Ryan's going to hand off to me. Here we go. Okay, Ryan, I think we need to switch to my view. Can you make sure my view is showing?
Yep, I see your view.
We're still seeing your sketch, so.
I can, and that's just going to be changing me back to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Hopefully everyone can see my notebook, and I have a screenshot of the view that Ryan and I just shared. As you'll see, okay, Ryan's gonna go watch the chats.
Yes.
So the way I do my field notebooks is I always have my metadata I enter first. So I enter where I am, latitude, longitude, the moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunset, and other things, elevation, winds, what the wind's doing, what the cloud cover is. That's really important in field journals because when you go back, you want to place yourself, you want to know what's going on. The more information, the better. That's the metadata. So I did that ahead of time, did some research. And then when we got there at 10 o'clock this morning, I did a quick bit of observation that we're in a typical glacial hanging valley, and Ryan will discuss what a hanging valley is later because I'm not exactly sure, but we will cover that in the Southern Fells. The creek runs down to something called Ritson's Force, which is a neat little waterfall and might have something to do with Hanging Valley, but I'm not sure. So we'll find out. So I'm going to approach this a little differently than Ryan. First of all, let me show you, if I were out in the field, I would have, this is my stand-up field sketching kit. I hold my journal and all my watercolor and everything are right there. That's how I would do it in the field. Since I'm not in the field, I'm going to do it a little differently so my arm doesn't obscure my drawing and painting when I get to that. So as I said, I'm going to approach this differently than Ryan. I'm kind of interested in those trees. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on those trees and the beautiful, I like that beautiful S of the creek. So I start out, rather than do a top and a bottom, I'm going to quick sketch in my sides so that if I mess up with the proportions and I need to extend the bottom maybe a little bit or the top, I can do that. I sketch straight to pen. I use pen. I don't use pencil. I don't like the way pencil smears on the watercolor paper over time. Someone asked about that. I use waterproof permanent ink and a fountain pen. Ballpoint pen would work just great. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to focus on those trees, as I said. I dot map first. You saw how Ryan just sort of felt out the landscape. I do a little bit ahead of time. I'm going to focus on those trees and that hump coming down. So I'm going to index it a little bit so as I sketch, I get the proportions right. And then I can change my mind later. So I'm coming down with that headland or whatever you call that around the creek. And the next thing I want to make sure I get the proportions right. I really like that wall. I'm going to be focused on the wall. I'm going to make sure I get that relationship, lightly sketch in that wall, because that's going to be something I'm going to be looking at during my field trip, those walls. So I'm interested in that. But I just did that pretty lightly using dots first to make sure that I liked where I put it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm looking at the shapes here. The shapes, this next shape here is, see, I pulled that up a little bit, is the meadow there. Not being too precious about this, as Ryan said. And then there's trees. That's what I want to focus on here. So I'm going to actually, I'm just dotting that in, dot, dot, dots, make sure I like the general shape. And notice I'm marking out, see, I'm a plant bird person, so I see different trees in here. I see willows probably, as well as these conifers, which are, we don't know if these are native conifers or introduced. Lots of tree planting in this area. So, and then I'm gonna quickly just for my purposes here, just so I maintain the shape as I go, just kind of put in conical shapes, as I said, and marking out this willowy thing. Okay, let's get these other shapes going. So since I got the basic shapes ahead of time, now I feel pretty comfortable with what I've got here. Now I just start adding the other lines, filling in. And I'm being sketchy, loose, not too many like really dark lines. So we don't want to emphasize that. Here I'm going to fill in more information on the wall. Get smaller, farther away, and a little bigger. I probably exaggerated that a little bit, but that's all right. And now I'm going to close this off because this is going to be about the trees. I'm going to leave that open there, kind of like that. So I'm going to give the wall just a tiny bit of suggestion of texture, not a lot. I don't want to go in and draw individual rocks here because that would give too much emphasis, might darken it a little better. What am I seeing here? I might go ahead and throw in this suggestion of this fence down here. Not a lot, just a little, very faint. And then I think since I'm with a geologist, I'm gonna add rocks, just for Ryan. So I got this. There's a real pretty foreground rock here. I'm gonna go ahead and grab. Notice how I'm just being really sketchy and loose here. I'm not trying to be perfect because this is a quick sketch. There's another rock settling in over here. Little suggestion of grasses. And if I had time, I might, there's a kind of a slope here I'm going to suggest. And throw in some of the clumps. Do rocks. Give the creek here a little bit of interest. I think I'm going to jump to color now. So you can see how I've captured that. My focus is more on those trees. I use just a few colors. I use a neutral yellow, quinacridone rose magenta as a magenta, and a nice cool clear blue. I use manganese blue hue, and then I have burnt sienna and danthorn blue. I'm not going to use this color here. This is kind of a wild card color that's completely uncommon. It's a purple ochre, but I won't add that one. So I mix all my colors right from those basically 5. So I'm going to just quick go in and notice your eye's going to say I want it to be green, but it's kind of more browny than green. Is that a term, brownie? You see how I'm mixing? I don't blend it all together. I want kind of a very marbly effect here. And I'm just going to do this pretty quick. Now notice how I'm going to let this go a little dry on my brush. So it's not filled in entirely. As Ryan said, you start out with the lights and work in intensity and darker as you go. I do a little trick where I use my neutral yellow and then actually drop in a little bit of the burnt sienna. Now this is going to be a little bit more green. Adding some of the cyan.
Roseann, there's a question about which brand of watercolor paint you're using.
These are all Daniel Smith. So notice I'm kind of a super wet brush here. I want it to be, it's called dry brush technique because I want some of that texture there. Now I'm gonna throw some green in here. Get that a little wet so it blends. And then while those dry, I'm gonna hit those pine trees or conifers, not sure what they are. Could be spruces, I'm using the warm blue and the yellow, the Dan Throne, to darken it up. These are pretty dark. And I'm just going to try to get some pine shapes going on here. Leaving white space.
Roseann, there's a question about what kind of paper you use.
This is 90-pound watercolor paper from B-E-E. I was telling Ryan yesterday that they're out right now. They've been closed, and I used another paper and it was horrible. It's just, I was having the hardest time. So I'm letting those, while I was talking, I used the wrong colors, so I'm going to clean that out. I'm going to throw in a little bit more dark there as those trees are drying even darker to get some definition. I'm not going to go too much crazier on that here because I can play with those later. I left the willows are a little bit brighter green, so I'm throwing in some brighter green there. And there's also quite a bit of shadow here, so I'm gonna fill up. Okay, real quick. How am I doing on time, Ryan? Let's see.
Oh, that's a good question. Sorry, I was looking at chat, not the time.
No, that's all right. Just double checking. Just want to make sure I'm okay. Good. Now you can see that's still kind of flat because I let the colors dry a little bit as I was going in. The field this may or may not dry more quickly. I'm going to add a little bit more dark green in the foreground here. I want it to be pretty dark.
Roseann, what kind of brush are you using?
This is an Isabey squirrel mop travel brush. So it breaks down, it's great. It's very tough. This is, I think, 5 years old. It is squirrel hair. So they're only about $30. All right, a little bit. I'm going to add some, want this little hillock here. Okay. I'm going to go back to those trees and lighten a few things up here. Hopefully that helped a little. Okay, leave those alone. One of the the things you have to really be aware of is not overworking things. I'm mixing some gray here with Dan Throne and burnt sienna. So you don't want to overwork things. Let's get this wall. Notice I'm like Ryan did, you know, dab, 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 dab. You don't want to like totally color in like a coloring book with line to line. You want to leave it pretty loose. These rocks some interest. I'm taking that gray and browning it up a little, and I'm going to give this a quick swoosh here. Well, I've got that brown. I might try to add some of those features we're seeing up here. Would I have put the wall there? Maybe I might experiment with that. Yeah, I could also find it distracting, so I might leave it out for now. Those trees are still wet. I was going to add some straight lines, but I think I'll wait because I will completely mess them up if I do that now. Put some definition in the bank here. And I realized I kind of want some more dark green. Down here, just a little bit. Oops, that's a little bit too dark. Notice how I'm dabbing off my brush frequently if I've got it too wet. I'll even go in and use my fingers. It's okay to do that. Just don't lick them because most paints are pretty toxic. Oh, could be overworking that, so I'm gonna let go. Knowing when to let go. They're still wet, but can I add some, just some suggestions of those tree trunks. It's not quite showing. This a little too wet, so it's gonna soak in. I think I'm gonna call it done in just a second. Because next, finally, I'm going to add that blue sky in the creek. Just a touch, because you don't want that to be like this solid blue thing. That's kind of weird. And also, I'm going to leave plenty of white. Maybe just a tiny touch back there. Oh. I think I'm going to call that done for now and answer any questions. I see here I can probably get some more green. See, okay, you know what I'm doing, guys? This is actually a really good example. This is what you need to do. Stop. Don't overwork your paintings or your sketches. This is from my book. It's something I really have to make myself do all the time. Just step away and be happy with this. I think what I would do here now is, I'm going to take notes here. This is a copse of trees. Is full of birds. It's May, so they're probably breeding, probably the common redstarts. And down there in the creek, I'm probably going to look for the white-throated dippers. I underline species so you can see them in your prose. And then those stone walls, which I love. Oh, I went back. Ryan does this too. Those stone walls are microhabitats in the fells, actually all over England. They're breeding, birds use them for breeding when there aren't trees, and when there are trees. It's used by salamanders and all sorts of species. Loads of vascular plants grow on the mosses, bryophytes. They're really interesting ecosystems. They funnel the water down. It's a great, very ancient part of the landscape there. All right. Any questions on that? Ryan, looks like I'm just got a few minutes.
Good. There's no questions in the chat.
It's always so hard to just stop.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see if people are doing, if they're doing their own sketches and feel comfortable just holding their sketches up to their camera so people can see what everybody's working on. That'd be cool.
So would they switch? Would they switch to?
Yeah, you'll have to switch it to see other people's. You'll have to switch from speaker view to gallery view. But cool. Yeah, there's so many good ones in there.
Oh, I gotta get mine up. Oh, nice! Look at that. How fun. Okay, I'm gonna do a screen capture. Okay, I can't do a screen capture. We don't have permission to grab everybody's pictures. Wonderful. Thank you all for sketching along. That's awesome. Now, what's really important for everyone to see and notice, we all have our own way of seeing everything. And landscapes, we're all noticing and pulling out different things, different perspectives. We even see colors and things differently. So it's a great example here of all the ways we see things. And that's why journaling like this is so exciting, is to see everyone else's views. Any other questions? No? Should we wonder
There's
if we
a question about putting a sky in your sketch. Do you generally do that?
in that particular view, I mean, yes, I usually do sky. I'm usually really bad at it. I always put too much water and I get lovely blooms and then I call them clouds. But that particular sketch, there wasn't sky in it. I was pulling a slice of a pretty close up landscape, so there wasn't sky, and so I didn't include that.
Cool. And then there's also a question about your metadata. Can you tell them a little bit more about the metadata?
Sure. Should I go back to the share? I cover the metadata. Let's see. Oh, there we go. In my book, but metadata is literally, it means data that goes with other data. So my nature data, the main part of it is, I'm seeing common redstarts, white-throated dippers might be foraging in the creek. That where we are, that's the hard data, that's the nature data. But to make that relevant, so what? I saw redstarts or I saw willows. It's not going to do anyone any good in the future, including yourself, if you don't say where you are, what the general weather was. If it was blowing a gale out and you wrote that down and you still saw dippers out foraging, how interesting that would be. So that's why metadata is really important. It tells you something about other data later that other people can also use. I have like 35 years of field journals, and I go back constantly and look at 10, 20-year-old data to see how things are changing, which interestingly, they are changing very much right now because of climate change. So. All right, should we do like a 2-minute break? I'm going to put up another poll. All right, I think we should start loading the next phase. It'll take a minute, and then we'll be pretty well on time. We take about 30 minutes then to do another walk up the valley or down the valley or whatever. So, oh, another new message. My sky became a thunderstorm. That happens to me a lot. If I just go with it. The colors, I've got those on my website, and I will put those in the resources section. They're all Daniel Smith. And do I ever use colored pencils? No, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole. I'm aware that the art part can suck all my time, and my interest is in the natural history, in learning the natural history and using the art for that. It's very also deeply satisfying to do the art, but I have to stop myself from buying too much stuff. That is my full field kit. Just fits. My whole sketching kit fits in here. So, and I do that on purpose, so that makes me focus. That's not the only way to do it. It's just what works for me. So if you find that you're not getting a lot done in the field, and it takes you too long to set everything up, you might want to refine it a little. Just depends on what you want to get out of it. So Ryan's going to take us back to the valley now.
Okay. So I'm going to chit chat a little bit here while people start coming back on from their break. We're going back to Mosedale. So hopefully everybody should see this. All right. So that look good, Roseann? I'm sharing correctly?
Back in Mosedale, people, you want to go back to your split screen views, side-by-side mode views.
Yeah. So normally on a field trip at this point, after sort of making a quick sketch and getting some thoughts in on terms of what I want to look at and what I want to keep an eye out for, I sort of get up from our little spot that we're sitting and sketching and start sort of walking around with eye tuned into some of these features. And so I'm gonna, as we walk around here in this view, I'm gonna try and pan slow enough to where everybody can come along with us. I'm going to talk through some of the things that I might be looking at now. But the other thing that we'll do, I'm going to switch over actually. We'll go back and forth a little bit with, I'm going to switch this to that view. Because one of the things that I would start doing at this point is maybe making some quick thumbnails. And this is both for the sake of sizing up some other scenes, but also to keep my eye tuned in to the landscape. So if I take this little, so what that would look like, you can see here. Even though these are relatively small sketches, they're not taking up the whole view, but they're detailed. I painted them. We went into a bit more detail. For now, though, I'm going to just sort of look around and make some really quick sketches that I'm going to call thumbnails, or this is, they're sometimes called landscape-itos, but they're really just to focus my eye. And so first off, you can see, all right, I'm looking at this little view of the hill slope coming down. I'm going to make a little box around that. I can see that slope. I can see some rocks up here, and some hills going off that way. And that's maybe it for that view. I'm looking at that and sort of noticing the hill slope and noticing the rocks. Maybe we come down in the valley a little bit more, and this is still sort of in your view, is I'm actually now looking at, so if I do a little landscape in this way, I can see the trail heading off this direction. But I'm noticing now that it's actually looks like it's going uphill, and there's a little ridge here as these slopes come back down in the background. And that's it for the sketch, but that's actually drawing my attention into this feature right here, that ridge. I don't really know what it is, but it's not necessarily something I may have, it's something I may have not noticed if I wasn't sketching. I could have easily walked up over that and ignored it. I'm gonna keep walking a little bit further here. Then I'm gonna go back over here as I'm sort of sketching and so now I can see that I'm kind of up on this ridge. So I'm going to keep that in mind. As I'm looking around, I'm going to keep looking up the valley here, and I'm going to look again. Now I can see there's some more ridges out there. Look in the distance, and you know, I'm going to do another quick landscape here, and I can see this side coming down, and then this side coming down. There's maybe a little lump in here, and a little lump in there, and then I'm on a rise right here. So you can see these are not finished drawings. These are literally just getting my eye into seeing those things. And now I'm actually pretty interested into what these two lumps are. I can still see these rocks up in the background here. They look similar. They're probably still the Berkerfell andesites. They could be interbedded. So andesites are lava flows, and so you often get interbedded ash deposits. So if there's a volcanic eruption, sometimes lava flows out, sometimes material gets blown into the air and then falls down. And so you may get sort of what we call interbedded lava flows and ash deposits, tuffs, we call them, TUFF. So that could be why these are a little bit lighter. I don't know for sure, but that's sort of a guess. But these things I can go look at. So let's take another little walk. I'm gonna walk down the trail a little bit more here. And I can still see a bunch of other stuff going on in the rocks here, but right now I'm actually more interested in these surface features because I can go up and look at them. So I'm gonna keep walking towards those. Okay, now I'm standing on one of those features and I can look across here. All right, let's do it. A quick little sketch of that is going to, let's see what that does. So again, we see this hill, which is now becoming familiar. This is Stirrup Crag on this side of Ubero. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's the bigger mountain. And we see rock outcrops up here. We see what is probably what we call talus. And that's basically just debris that's coming down the side here. We can see some little squiggly, probably debris flow tracks coming down. And then we get into some grassy hills down in here. But we see the stream coming in over here. We see a lump, and then the stream coming out over there. So that's interesting. But this is actually much more interesting over here. And I think this is actually what I want to draw. So, okay, so things that are perfect circles are not all that common. So that's sort of drawing my attention right there. So I want to draw that and see if I can sort of understand that feature. And so as we're doing this, we'll also sort of talk about the difference. So I've been going back and forth between talking about features, surface features, and the bedrock. Let me take a moment to clarify what I'm talking about there, and that there are rocks that are part of the what we call the bedrock, and these are usually older rocks. They're the things that you would pick up and the easiest definition of what's a rock and what's just a pile of sediments is if you throw it at a car window, will it break the car window? Then it's a rock. If it doesn't break the car window, it's just a pile of dirt. And so in this case, though, we're also talking about these old rocks that are Ordovician in age, 450 million years old, versus things that are happening at the surface now, or relatively recent landforms that are, in this case, probably mostly related to glaciers. And those are much younger. Those are probably in the 20,000 year range, maybe younger, 12,000 years. So a big difference in age and very unrelated. So these andesites are not at all related to the glaciers, the glacial forms that we're looking at now. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm actually going to start looking at this little round hollow. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to, you know, as usual, I'm going to start with a sort of really rough, light outline of that feature. I'm going to put in some of these hill slopes in the background just to give it some context. I'm not really worried about these hills in the background because that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm just putting them in there for context. And this is another, I tend to do this a lot. We're just adding curvature, little curved lines to suggest the surface. And again, they're still pretty light at this point. And the way I do this, instead of sort of planning it out, I just keep it light and keep getting a little bit darker and a little bit more defined, which lets me change a little bit if I get something in the wrong place, because it's a light line and it'll fade into the background if I get it wrong. We can see there's a little bit of, there's some grass tufts over here. I'll make this line now. I'm pretty happy with where this was, so I'm going to make this a little bit darker. These tufts of grass are coming out a little bit here. Some little tufts in here, some rocks. And while I'm drawing this, I'm sort of, you know, getting a better sense of, okay, so there's this circular depression, and then there's this ring around it. I don't really know why that would be there yet. So and I'm putting horizontal lines in here to give the sense that this is a flat surface in there, as opposed to these curved lines that are giving this rim. And I'm going to put a little bit more definition in there, and then I'm going to call that and think, that's good enough for a quick little sketch to sort of draw my attention to that. I'm going to throw in some quick color while we're chatting here. Any questions coming up as we're going?
Not yet.
Great. So I'm going to And what you see I'm doing is I basically just threw down of the lighter colors I want to play with. I threw down a wet splash of that, and then I'm coming in with a little bit of this sort of muted green and adding a little bit more flavor in there into the yellow ochre mix that's already there. The rims are, there's some yellow in there, so I'm going to just drop a little bit in there. So basically what I'm doing is I'm doing essentially mixing on the paper as we go here. This is a little bit, there's clearly some more green on the sides here. These hills are, I don't want these hills to pop out, so I'm going to make them a little less saturated, a little less. There's a little bit of rocky outcrops coming in here, so I'm going to put a little bit more brown up in there just to get that sense that there is some actual outcrops of rocks coming in there. And then just going to take a little bit of shadow violet for these hills back here just to give them, since they're back in the distance. I'm going to throw some sky in quickly.
What color do you use for the sky, Ryan?
This is cerulean. Yeah. I tend to mix. I tend to do it differently. So sometimes right now I'm sort of using consistent sky colors, but I'll mix in a little ultramarine sometimes. Yeah.
So people are asking, what is that?
Sorry, what is?
So
drawing.
What are you they're asking about the landform now.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Everybody's curious. So mission accomplished. So what this actually is, and this would be actually hard to tell. So let me finish up the drawing here, and then we're going to step to another view and talk about it. The last sort of thing that I always do here in terms of the paint is adding my shadows, and there isn't a lot of shadow in the scene itself. It's pretty flat light. I'm kind of going to make up a little bit of shadow here. I'm not going to overdo it, but I want to give a little bit of definition. So I'm going to pick a sun angle and go with it. This can certainly be a little risky at times, but it's a pretty simple shape, and I think I can guess at some of these shadows without taking too much of a risk. That's a little bit more of these. Okay, so I'm going to throw another bounding box on here, just because I like that. Easy peasy. None of this has to be perfect. So what is that? Well, let's actually go back. Let's walk around a little bit, see if we can get a little bit better view looking down on it. I think this will do. So this is that. So that yellow dot is where we were sketching from, and this circular feature here is what we were looking at. So what this actually is, and I don't know that I would have immediately, I actually had to look this one up, so I cheated a little bit. I don't know that I would have recognized it for what it was, but this is a snow avalanche impact structure. So this is actually what happens when a large avalanche of snow that also has, you know, some rocks that it entrains in it, slams down, comes off of the hill slope, probably from up here, and crashes down into the ground, creates a little bit of depression where there's a big pile of snow. The snow melts and just leaves a rim of rock around. This is something that happens in the modern environment as well that you can see happens. So yeah, this is evidence of a very large snow avalanche. On the other hand, this that we were looking at, and again, this took some research on my part, I didn't come up with this, so this pile of rocks here is probably something different. This is probably a rock avalanche that came off of this mountain that was then subsequently dissected by this river. Let's actually zoom in here. And this is something, these days, you know, there's always a push and pull between how much you want to do sort of traditional naturalist, what do you see in the field only, versus using all the digital resources that are available. And for me, obviously it's a virtual field trip, so it's easy to pull in those digital resources, but I tend to see it as a little bit of a balance. I think it's easy to go overboard on the digital side, but this is a perfect example of where we can actually pull up the satellite. We can do this in the field. My guess is there's probably cell phone coverage here these days, almost everywhere there is. We could pull this map up and actually get a little bit better sense. So if I show this now you can see this is that ice avalanche impact structure that we just sketched. And this feature, ooh, a little bit too much. This feature here is this large rock avalanche that was then subsequently cut by the stream. It was probably connected to a cone coming off of this hill over here that has now been cut through by the creek.
We have a question about how old these might be.
This is a guess. So I think the two time periods that we would be looking at would be the rock avalanche. I don't know about that. The ice one would have to be probably at a time when there was more snow, and I would guess that it was probably the most recent sort of glacial stage would be what's called the Younger Dryas, which was about, I think, 12,000 years ago. I'm generalizing on all of this, so unfortunately it's recording so you can quote me, but whatever. So I think about 12,000 years ago for the Younger Dryas. Younger Dryas is just a name for that glacial period. And the earlier periods of glaciation would be sort of in the 20 to 25,000 year range, and that's what the last glacial maximum. The Younger Dryas is just sort of a smaller glacial period. That I do know that there is evidence of the Younger Dryas in this area, but I don't know if those features are specifically related to that. I hope that and just for fun, going down the rabbit hole, Younger Dryas is actually named after, the word Dryas is named after the plant, the Dryas octopetala, which is a little 8-petaled flower, alpine flower. And the Dryas octopetalis is named after the Dryads, which are from Greek mythology. And the Dryads are named after the ancient Greek word dryas for oaks. So you could really say the period is named after oak trees.
That's awesome. And that's the type of thing you would look up later and then add back into your journal, and it enhances our knowledge so deeply. I love that. Someone was asking, you know, how did you find out it was the snow avalanche? So as we said, you put it in your journal because he sketched it. He found it interesting. He would write questions in his journal, observations. He would write I'm sure he's going to go back and write how wide it is, the depth, lots of information. Then later when he gets home, he can or he's at the pub later and has internet, he can look up that information in geology websites or what have you.
I think the sort of easy answer is that almost any information out there is available if you just Google it. It's kind of the cheating answer, just Google it, but it's amazingly true sometimes. So a lot of this, I actually just Googled geology of this valley, found some papers, found some articles, read those, looked online at the maps for the British Geological Survey and read those. Obviously, that takes some knowledge of what you're looking at. It's not exactly intelligible, but they're all accessible. There's nothing that would prevent you from getting access to a lot of this information.
Yeah, that's great. It's, again, as we said, it's all about becoming better naturalists. That's what we're doing here. So, Ryan, do you want me to go over to this view now and show people what I pulled out, which was a little different? And I love that avalanche impact thing. That's just so awesome. I just completely geeked out about that. Also, it reminded me I'd never want to be here in the winter. So I'm going to hop over because I did a screenshot of that. There we go. And now, while Ryan was talking, I actually started doing a little sketch because I knew we were going to be running a little short on time. We want time for questions and answers. But let's see. My screenshot, there we go. I had that there. What I really, so I'm completely new to this type of landscape. I'm not a geologist, but I really noticed that strong U shape in the valley that is very common. Now I've read later of glacial valleys, that U. So I'm going to sketch that U, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and probably pull in that wall as well. Can you guys see everything, Ryan?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay. I think you're still on the screen. I don't know how people are seeing that. Okay, so I start again. I'm going to start by doing my vertical, the boundaries on the sides, and leaving the bottom and the top open for in case I get the proportions wrong. So what I really like about this was that U shape. So that's what I'm going to focus on first. These so there's these rocky outcrops here coming down, and I'm going to swoosh in that amazing valley here, because that's really what I want to capture, is that lovely view. And let's see, this has a little bit of dots there, here. I'm going to go back. Really focusing on, actually, Ryan, I think I'm going to mute you.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting that U shape. Now I'm going to go and lightly sketch in these hills in the background. And I'm using my pen very lightly here. And there's more of that swooshiness there, and I'm going to keep that swooshy going. Pull this here. I'm going to try to reserve this. I don't know if I'll be able to, that white avalanche shoot. Not sure what it's called. Okay, I'm going to go pretty quickly here so we don't run out of time. Swoosh, swoosh, more swooshing. I'm not going to do a whole lot of detail in here because I want it to stay in the background. And then I really love that wall. So I think I'm going to try to capture that as it disappears over this little hill here. I was really enamored of these walls. Because of the great wildlife habitat they create. So notice how that's getting closer together as it recedes. This hill comes down here. Okay, so what else do we have in here? I'm not going to put in this other wall or the trees. I'm going to focus on that valley for now because that's really what I want to capture. There's a feature here. The creek is coming in, and it probably does a turn like that there. You know, I could just do a suggestion of the other wall there. I'm going to keep this swooshes, can't quite say that. And then maybe to give it some depth here, I'm going to draw this, lightly draw this, how that wall recedes. It's pretty, these walls are pretty amazing. Now, here I'm going to do rocks by scribbling. I'm not going to try to draw every rock. I'm going to do more detail close up here. And then as I get farther away, it's going to get lighter until it's just a dark thing.
Roseann, there's a question about, do you have tips on perspective?
Yeah, what you just see me doing by this making the wall recede like that is as it's closer to us, it's larger, and as it goes farther away, it gets smaller. And you do the same thing with other features. And you know, I don't have time to go into all the theory of perspective and everything, but you want to, what I would recommend rather than getting angst about perspective is squint, take a look at that landscape and see that wall as a shape on the page. Don't try to think too hard about it. So it's a shape of a very long skinny triangle laying on its side with a little curve. And that's what I drew. I didn't try to get all too precious about it. All right, well, I think I don't want to go over the time too much. What I would do color-wise, I'm kind of jumping ahead here. So I wanted to get that color going. I'm just going to do a little bit, just to sort of show you how I would knock back the those mountains. I'm going to go fairly purpley on those mountains. Lavender, I would call it lavender. Let's see how that looks. And I'm going to do it pretty lightly. And then I'll go back later. And it's going to dry lighter. But I'll go back later and add other features and things. Notice how I'm going in the direction I want to show how that valley, the swoosh, swoosh of that valley. So that's going to dry lighter, and then I'm going to go back later and add just a tiny wash of green on top of it when I can. And quickly here. Notice how I'm not filling everything in. Dry brushing a little bit here. Adding a little burnt sienna to that to make it a little more olive here. I wanted this to kind of pop out more. And then I'll actually going to finish up soon here. But I would go, real quickly, I'll show you, I would go in and I'm making gray here with burnt sienna and indanthrone. And I would go in here and I want to get these rocks here. Oops, ha. Oops, right. Yeah, I'm rushing. Ha. That's why I use lifting watercolors. They're a little easier to pull off when you mess up. And I can go back in later and add features. I'm not going to do it right now. I can post this, finish it up a little later. Not a whole lot more to do, but I want to leave room for Q&As. I would probably go in and do a sky like so. I would wet it first. Let's see if I can do this real fast. Ha! I'm going to do I use the manganese blue. I'm going to do it pretty light. I just want to bare mention of it here. And then because it's going to be part of my page, I'm going to write on the sky. I'm going to pull that up like that. So I would go back in, I'll detail paint the darks and the pretty colors on the rocks. And then would go back in and I'm going to take notes, like up here would be peregrine nesting habitat, peregrine's nest here. These volcanic outcroppings, I would make a note, probably a line, and call out that lovely U shape. I would make a list and information about what lives in these lovely dry stone walls here, and so on. And so I'll post the finished one, but we've got 7 minutes left, so that's how I approached that one, with my interests being, I look at the landscape, also what is it about the landscape that the animals, where would I find the animals, where would I look for peregrines? Maybe later I would get to see one. So that is how I would approach that, and I'll finish it up and put that on the website So how are we doing with questions? Oops, I'll unmute you.
There we go. So there was a question about the U shape and the hanging valley and what's what. Maybe I will go ahead and answer that quickly. And I will actually do I'm going to share my screen, and this will be for those that have seen this. This will be kind of cool. For those that haven't seen this, this might be awesome. So this is Google Earth. This is Google Earth Web, and we've already zoomed in. So this is the area that we're in. This is the Lakes District. I'm going to zoom in here. Wastwater and Wasdale Head. This is, oh, by the way, this is Scuffle Pike here is the highest peak in England. And we can sort of see that in some of our stuff. So we're nearby there. But what I wanted to show you is this is also has topography in it. So we're going to rotate down. There's a.
Oops, sorry about that. Just you guys can pull that to the side.
And so you can sort of see this is obviously something that you may not do in the field, but these days you can start doing this in the field. And so figuring out how this works for you. So this is the valley that we were in, and you can see that U shape that she was drawing is that a flat bottom as opposed to a narrow V shape of a stream channel. And this is a classic feature of glaciated valleys, because as glaciers come down, a river will cut a very narrow valley usually, and so it will have a V profile. Whereas a glacier, when it comes down in, will erode more uniformly across the bottom and create a U-shaped basin. The hanging valley part of this, I'm actually guessing at this a little bit, classic hanging valley is like Bridal Veil Falls in Yosemite, where you have a U-shaped valley that comes off and drops off a cliff into a larger valley. And how you get that, and here, it's not as pronounced. This valley that's coming down here is a larger valley and slightly lower elevation. And in all likelihood, the glacier coming out of here hit the glacier coming out of here, but this is coming in at a higher elevation. And so once those glaciers eroded, you were left with what's called Ritson Force here, which is waterfall. So there's a little bit of drop in topography that makes this valley hanging relative to this. And let's, I made actually, to show you a better version of this. If I can spell, well, let's just go Yosemite. And feel free to ask questions as you're going along in here, because I'm just sort of showing you. This is also a great tool for, figuring stuff out and looking here. You can pull information off of here. You can prepare for your trips. We are going, oh, that's not the valley, that's the national park. So now, so this is a classic glaciated valley as well. And you can see here, it's a flat bottom U-shaped valley. This is Yosemite in California. And this is a very classic glaciated land surface. But at Hanging Valley, we'll probably see one over here, where you have, let's see, where's a good one? Oh, sorry, I'm not finding the perfect one that I wanted here, but.
I'm gonna interrupt for just a second.
Yep.
We have a sketching question that I think it would be important to answer.
Yep.
I noticed that you let the terrestrial features define the creek. I had a hard time getting the shape correct because I started to draw the creek first. Any comment on that? That's a really good question. And also, do you include a detailed sketch of a plant or an animal in your journal when you sketch in the field? And that for sure, and I'll share examples later. I'll email these all out to you guys. Definitely I would draw details, and I've got some good examples of that. But Ryan, do you want to tackle that question about we let the landscape kind of define the creek rather than trying to draw the creek directly?
Oh, sure.
We have like 3 minutes.
Yeah. So let me see
And I do have another poll up there, guys. If you push that aside, I'd love to know your feedback on that poll. Would be great.
Yeah, I guess I'm not entirely sure how to answer that. Yes, I definitely let the terrestrial features define the creek. I think the hardest part, I think that getting the perspective on the creek, because we want to draw it as we imagine it from the top down, but we need to draw it actually from the view that we're looking at it. And I think that the hardest part is is to avoid drawing what you think it looks like and focus on what it actually looks like. And it sounds cliche to say, but it is so true. And it's so hard sometimes because we do have a good sense of what it is. We do see in three dimensions. We have been walking around and seeing it from a lot of different perspectives. And so this is where, like, if it helps that, Roseann's way of doing the dot mapping first really does sort of force you into like drawing it as it actually is. So in some ways, if you're having trouble, it might be that.
I think you let the shapes define first, and that'll help keep you from trying to draw the fun bits first. And that, I'm always doing that. I was tempted to go straight for the trees or straight for the creek, when no, I need to get those big shapes so everything fits in, and you get that one shape, the creek flows around that shape. You get the next shape is going to define the creek. Does that, I think
that makes sense.
Sounds good. No.
There's also a question in here about including detailed sketch of plant or animal in your journal.
Yeah.
For me, so obviously as a geologist, I definitely come from a perspective of landscapes and landforms, and rocks are the first thing I'm looking at. It really depends on what I'm interested in. And, if I'm out there on a geology field trip or doing geology research, I'm probably not going to include the plants and animals. I might, because they are interesting and they do give context. But I might have, there's always too much good stuff. And so you do have to sort of pick your battles. And so if I'm interested in the landforms, I probably won't include those sketches. That said, if I'm just out there for fun on a hike and sketching for fun, I probably would if I saw animals or plants or something there. I mean, my tendency is, for grasses are not my thing. I don't know my grasses very well. So if it's just a grass covered hill slope, I'm not likely to focus in on that. But that's not because grasses aren't interesting. I just don't know them, and they're hard to know.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, we're now at 12:01, so I think we probably need to wrap up. People have to go get lunch. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ryan. Amazing. He carried a huge burden on this one, being the geology guy and sharing that wonderful website and setting it all up. So thank you, Ryan. This is fun. We'll be sending out a more detailed survey, if you don't mind. Think about other things you would like us to cover, because we'd like to keep doing this and developing even more tools and getting better cameras. I still have to replace my camera. So everyone, thank you. Thank you for coming, and we will see you next time. And take care, everyone. Stay sane, stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.